So a lot of our childhoods actually felt like an open world game, almost like GTA with no map, where you just ran side quests all year long. And the interesting thing is that this no longer exists for the next generations, even for my younger sister's generations. That's not even going to be a thing. And I just kind of I wrote a lot of notes because I can't remember all this at once. So I'm just going to go through it, and maybe you guys can relate and see if you guys had something similar. I can't be the only one who's done this, but let's look at a few things. First things first is going on bikes everywhere, right? So me and my friend group, we used to bike everywhere possible. And as kids, you know how you're kind of afraid to go too far from home because it's just too far and you haven't been that far? And we never looked at maps, Google Maps. Nobody used that shit before. So you would just explore. You would just kind of go there and unlock new layers of the map. You're like, I haven't been there before. And so sometimes we would get on our bikes and be like, all right, today, take your backpacks, right? Pack some water with you, pack some snacks. You're responsible for this, you're responsible for that. And we're gonna, one friend has the bike lock, so he's gonna lock all of our bikes together when we have to park somewhere. And today we're going to that area that we've heard, our parents have driven us there. But you know how driving, when your parents are driving and you're a kid in the car, you never really know how you get there. You just kind of teleport there and, oh, we're in this one area. And so as a kid, we're going to try to get there. We don't know how, but we're just going to go that way and try not to get lost. And that was so exhilarating. Like it felt like such a mission, like an actual adventure. And we would just bike for like hours in some way. And then we're like, I think this is the way home. Let's try to remember. And then you'd always have that one friend who was like, guys, I think we shouldn't go too far because we're going to get lost. And it was such a thing. And we didn't have phones. Who's going to call us? Like nobody. We don't have a phone with us. And yeah, so we would just discover new spots. It was the shit. Another thing is, for example, when our friendships used to be a lot more physical, so instead of, calling someone, you would throw rocks at the window. I would literally throw rocks at my friend's window because it was a higher floor, until they would look out and be like, what do you want? And I'm like, we're going outside. All right, I'll be down in 5. And then you would just sit downstairs and wait for them. That's how you would gather your friend group. You just keep knocking doors, throwing rocks. That's how it was. Instead of hopping on Discord, well, we use Skype, of course, but we would just meet at the spot. Sometimes, you would just go to this one place where your friends are probably hanging out, so chances are you'll find them there. And often you did find them there. And if you were there by yourself, someone is going to show up sooner or later. It was a guarantee you're going to meet someone at the spot, right? And obviously, one thing as friends that we used to do is we had a ritual. Rituals, not in the weird way, not in some cult way, more like the default go-to thing that you would do with your friends. So, for example, one of the things we used to do is, there's like a family recreation center. It's called the YMCA. I don't know if you guys know, but we had memberships there, and it was a 45-minute walk. So whenever our parents were basically forcing us to come to the park with them, it was so boring. We didn't want to go to the park with them. They'd be like, all right, then you have to go outside. Okay, we'll go outside. We'll go to the YMCA. And on the way to the YMCA, we had our mission. It's like, we're going to stop by this one store because it was called Safeway, because it gives out free cookies, whichever didn't go on the shelf. And because we were kids, they'll give it to us for free. So we'd go get our cookies. Okay, now we're going to Superstore across the road. And we would sample free candy because you could technically sample. So we would sample one of each candy. And the ones that you can just put in a bag with a shovel. And then we would actually buy some, but we didn't have much money. We made some money by finding $1 in the shopping cart and then plugging it into another one, and then we'd use that $1, and then we basically had to put enough candy and also scam the system so that we don't get charged fully for it and we can actually afford to buy it. And it's funny because self-checkouts were just becoming a thing, and if we're in the self-checkout, then we're just gonna put half of the item not on the scale so that we could basically afford the amount of candy. Or if it was a cashier, we would basically write the wrong number of a cheaper candy on the thing, and the cashier usually doesn't know, and they would just put it in and they just, not give a shit. And then we would eat that candy, go all the way to the YMCA, go to the gym, go to the pool. Gym was just fuck around. That's all we did. Go to the pool. After the pool, especially when we were in high school, we used to play hill climb racing on our iPods. Games, apps, phone games back then were kind of shit. They weren't that good, honestly. And so they were never that addictive. So we would play for a bit and then we'd go home. And that was like the big ritual. Another thing we used to do is during lunchtime, there was an option to go home for lunch. We usually stayed because we brought lunches, but my friend, being the kind of person he is, he got kicked off the lunch program. Eventually, he got banned from staying for lunch because he was too troublesome. So we're like, all right, well, I guess now we are going to be going home for lunch. And it was funny because we would run the entire way to maximize our time. It took us 5 minutes to get home. We would hop on Minecraft. We'd play Minecraft for like 45 minutes, try to eat as well. And then we're like, all right, run to school. Let's meet at the spot and then run to school. And that's what we would do every day. And that was, honestly, it was crazy to think that we did that. And 45 minutes back then of playing games felt like a huge win because also your parents are not home, so it's like free 45 minutes because your parents control how much time you can spend on the computer. You're probably playing on the family computer anyway, so that 45 minutes alone at home was the best shit. And then you run to school. What else did we do? We played outside in the river. There was like a little shitty river that was running. In some places it was actually like dangerous and big, but in some places it was like this small little runoff, and we would build a bridge out of logs and cross it into this little island. And that's where we had our hideout. We made weapons out of branches. We would take knives and carve out weapony looking things. We had like a club, we had a spear, whatever kids can make with weapons. We had a bow. What would we shoot? We would try to hunt. We never successfully hunted anything. There wasn't even enough animals to hunt. But it was just fun to imagine that we have this whole hideout, we have weapons, we built a little fort in a tree that we could climb and we could hide everything so none of the other kids could find it. And then at one point, somebody else, which was our rival gang, discovered that we had a little hideout. And so it was like a little war going on. It was so fun, looking back. What else do we have? Our economies, exchanging, finding alcohol bottles and exchanging them for cents, literal cents at the exchange store. What else? Going to different places, parks, YMCA, of course. The cool thing is, once it was initially just me and my friend, and we did this for a long time until high school. And high school is when we continued doing everything we do, but we had to recruit. And what's interesting is we just thought, hey, we want to grow our friend group, because in high school, suddenly all the friend groups grew bigger and we didn't want to be like behind. So we're thought of, okay, we need to recruit people. And it was the funniest thing ever trying to imagine each person doing these things with us. Like, who would actually go to Superstore with us? Like, that was just part of a ritual. Who would actually go and practice parkour on this one private property? And most people would never fit the role. But sooner or later, after a year in high school, we ended up hanging out with people, and eventually, more and more people joined our friend group, and it was hilarious walking with, instead of just your friend, now it's many of us. And we would go visit this one large apartment complex where we used to climb this tall wall and practice parkour, right? It was super fun. And the funny thing is, you would always get some old people yelling at you like, you're on camera, smile, I'm calling the cops, or get off private property. And then of course we would hide or go away for a bit, and then we'd come back and keep practicing. And I don't even know if I have any pictures from then, because back then most of that childhood was offline. It was not even recorded, right? It's just all in memory. And so that was the whole practice parkour. That was a whole other thing. Another thing is stalking your crush home, all right? The girl you like in middle school, you think you're gonna somehow get her to like you by stalking her, that was the norm. It's like, you're not going to stalk her Facebook. That wasn't a thing. I think it became a thing, but it wasn't very popular at that time. Especially Instagram wasn't a thing either. And so I remember my friend and I, we would just stalk our crush home. And each day we would get further and further before we figure out where they live. Even though I don't know why we needed to know where they lived. It was just for fun. We just wanted to know so that we can kind of like spy on them and see what they're up to. And eventually we would make it further and further without getting discovered. You know, we'd have to hide, pretend we're going somewhere, you know. It was a whole thing. Visiting the malls as kids, it was crazy. You know, I don't think malls are that popular these days. Of course, people go there to buy shit, but it was the hangout spot for kids because going to the mall for us felt like we're grown-ups because we either went super far, rode our bikes there, or if we really had to, we took the bus. But usually we just biked there. And yeah, that was pretty interesting. What else did we have? Yeah. Well, all in all, it was mostly dominated by all these experiences, not so much online. Online happened during the teenage years. But let me know if you guys actually had anything similar. I don't think it's that crazy. At the time, it seemed crazy. But now, looking back, I think a lot of us, especially millennials, had these kind of childhoods. I am 1999, so I'm technically Gen Z, but that's what we did. And I think that's just not a thing anymore at all. Kids these days are so passive. They're docile. They're overly protected by society and the parents that, you know, if a kid went outside, they wouldn't even know what to do because your brain is just thinking the whole time about going on your phone or using the tablet or whatever, watching YouTube. So that's really unfortunate. That's a huge thing lost. And it feels like this whole time we're just trying to relive those moments, whether it's nostalgic or not. We're trying to do that essentially within our lives now, but it's just so much harder because you have life, you have to work and do stuff. But the people who are privileged enough, all right, someone's banging on my door. The people who are privileged enough to say that they still have those day one friends, that is the biggest flex. Okay, it looks like I have to go. Thanks for watching.